A very good morning, everybody who is here just now. We seem to be less than usual, so maybe some people have got trouble joining up. So anyway, good morning. And for those of you joining us on YouTube, then good morning, or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you're listening. This is the 8th of our 9 teachings on the third Karmapa's text on Buddha nature. And so let's start in a really excellent way and with a excellent motivation. And like the last time we met, I think it was last time we met, then we'll do the starting prayers in English so that we all know what we're saying and what we're thinking. And as ever, then we're making our refuge bodhicitta wishes. You know, bodhicitta is the longing to achieve this Buddha nature that we are hearing about so we can benefit everybody. It's really at the very heart of the matter. In the bodhicitta prayer, we say, until I reached the very heart of enlightenment. And the very heart of enlightenment is simply this Buddha nature. So until we are it, then we take refuge, and then we generate our positive, loving, compassionate, joyous equanimity thoughts and so on. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on, until we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality to be able to truly help the sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well, live long, be healthy, be well provided for, have good friends, find respect, live in places of peace and plenty. Most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these things to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating the causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being that's totally beyond suffering. And may they attain the great equanimity, free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamawate shameta shatra Am kuri mare jite karota ke orite jowati olla yane Vishudane male malapana ye kukure kaka grase Grasana omuke paramuke hamuke Shamme dawane savagraha bandhanane negretva Sava bhava pravadina vimukta marapasha Savitva Buddha Mudra Anurgatita Savamare Bhutsarita Parishuddhe Vigashantu Savamara Kama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above my head, on lotus and moon seed, through your immense kindness, ever sustain me, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. Thank you. So let's pick up. We're doing okay. Sometimes we get a bit short of time at the end of the text, but with this particular one, we're doing okay. And last time we ended up, let me see if I can find it, with me giving a very, very quick run through for this verse. We have, you remember, we had the analogy of the Vaidurya gem of mind, this Vaidurya, which actually doesn't exist in this world, it's in the Deva realms, but it's a wonderful jewel, often on the basis of the wish-fulfilling jewels. So, yeah, I brought along something, but it won't work as a sample, right? It's because there's too much light. So I don't think you can see this, but it's rock, a piece of rough rock, sort of white rock. Yeah. But inside, of course, it's shiny crystals. So it's the example of gem that's still in the rock, so you can't see a thing. And I remember, I think it was probably a big rip-off. I think I told you in other courses. But when I was in my younger days traveling through Afghanistan in 1970, they were selling 1 kilo chunks of emerald ore. So you took your chance. You actually were buying a rock for a couple of dollars. And it was guaranteed, although I don't know how they guaranteed it, to be emerald ore. And you may or may not find a fortune of a stone inside. Anyway, a lot of us bought one just in case. So, but it just looks like rock, and you can't tell till you process it, you know, what's inside. So we had that example. So it says, similarly, in order to cleanse the Vaidurya gem of mind from the threefold shell of defilement, so we went through those last time very quickly, but threefold shell of defilements, one thing, another rock that's hiding the gem, dualistic knowledge, great, dualistic knowledge, not so great, because it blocks the true nature of your mind. This becomes interesting later on in the path. First we have to learn a lot, then we have to unlearn it. There doesn't seem to be any quick shortcut beyond that. And then the third bit of rock that stops us from being this Buddha nature, or stops it from being apparent, is obstacles to meditation. So we acquire these in one life. Our meditation gets into a pickle. It gets not so good, or we don't follow the instructions properly. Whatever it is, we break samaya. So that happens in one life. Then in a future life, of course, you're a very different person. You don't remember any of that. But when you sit down to meditate, or when you go to retreat to meditate, or then when you're doing either certain practices specifically, so you can do one practice fine, do Chinrezig fine, do this one fine. But then when you come to this practice, obstacles, difficulties. So that comes from the past. The good news is that, of course, by working with the difficulties and breaking through, then we make progress. We got stuck before. Sometimes we get stuck again and again. It's life after life. The same thing happens. Like that film Groundhog Day. This really happens. This really happens. I've seen this with people in retreat, people practicing. Lovely story, magical story. Then you come to the and sometimes our Rinpoches, they see it coming. Sometimes they would tell me, it's coming, and then it comes, and then people hit the same wall. And then we've all got our fingers crossed. Will they make it through? Won't they? Will they? And then if they can't, then sometimes people rebound quite strongly. They really can react very, very strongly against the Dharma, against the teacher, against the monastery, against the system. And it's because it's traumatic. You go very deep, you touch something very, very precious, and then you can't quite make it. That's a big shock to the system, big shock to the ego and everything. So anyway, hindrances to meditate. There are all sorts of hindrances. I'm just focusing on one. There are many. So these are the three things which are blocking up. Just a second. Okay. I'm just checking nobody needs help because they're stuck. Else can't get in. So that's like the rock that's coming up the gem. So then one needs to remove the rock, like in the example, using rough methods and finer and finer and finer methods. As our mind gets finer and finer, we need more and more subtle methods. At the beginning, we're dealing with big anger, big desire, big distraction. Our mind can't stay still and so on. It's the gross level. And then bit by bit, we need more and more subtle advice and guidance. So we went through that briefly last time, the 5 stages of the path. I won't go back there, but it's very important. Now the next verse, which I don't think we did last time, it's important for us. When the improper mode of, here we've got thinking, but let's call it mental activity. When the improper mode of mental activity meets the proper mode of mental activity, it's like 2 pieces of wood which ignite through friction and burn out. So then all mental activity vanishes. This is a key point. It's a key point about relative level Buddhist practice. And it's a key point not just for us, it was a key point in Buddhist history, and it's given rise to different traditions, like the Zen tradition, which is so different in many ways from the Tibetan tradition, which has so much ritual, so many details, so much of what they call the graduated path. First you do this, then that, then that, and that. It's not go for the absolute truth straight away, or just keep sitting until Buddha nature dawns. We have lots and lots of methods. So in history, do we need all that stuff? Where did it come from? Did Buddha really teach all of that stuff that they do in Tibet? All of those endless rituals, complicated things they do, the ceremonies, symbolic stuff, dance, traumas, so much stuff. In the first place, at the time of Buddha in India, did they do that? How did it come about? Do we need it? And then relative teachings, academic teachings, beside methods, meditation methods, ritual methods, then we have teachings. This is what I've been doing for the last 2 years. Blah, 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 blah. Ideas, 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 ideas. Support documents, acres of paper, so much stuff. So I can't answer you this question because history just happened. What's happening now is amazing in this last 10 years especially, but 10, 20 years. Then there's such a clearer view of how Buddhist history evolved. And as I mentioned I'm not sure this course, but for a couple of years now, the Karmapa has been doing talks about the origins of Vajrayana. And he just gets slowed down every time, because the more he learns, the more he sees what an amazing story and complicated story the evolution of Dharma was. First in India, and then in the other countries where it lived in exile, especially after it was eliminated from India in the 12th century. So in all of this text, if we come back to it, by the third Karmapa, then we have two stories going on. The absolute story, simple, Buddha nature, it's always been. It is. Yeah, it can manifest as the 32 qualities of Dharmakaya. We saw those. The 10 powers, the 4 fearlessnesses, and so on. It can manifest as the 32 qualities of Formkayas, of course. But that just is. We'll come back to that in later verses, this week or next week, to see a bit more about the isness and its manifestation. So we've got that story, which doesn't belong to anybody. Whether people come and go, lives come and go, universes come and go, that's the basic isness of everything. We have that which has one nature, is. Permanent, is. And then we've got the other nature, which is all of our stories, streams of consciousness, which change every split second. You can't pin them down, you can't find them. But when we step back and look, I'm me, you're you, each one of us here. How many here today? 30 something? 30 very, very different stories. And you go out there in the world, and if we could have a next week investigation and just check out all the 8 billion humans on this planet, I think you'd find every one of them's a different story. Now, this story of our consciousness, that's you right now. This is me right now. Our thoughts, our feelings, our history, all the baggage is never going to disappear of its own accord. If we want this mind, this consciousness mind, this changing, impermanent consciousness mind, which suffers from time to time and suffers a lot from time to time, to become, we want that to become the timeless kindness, perfection of Buddha mind, we have to work. And that work is Dharma. Even though it always was perfect, even though right now it's all perfect, and not, we'll see in a minute, not just perfect there behind the veil. Even what we're experiencing now is, when we can see it, perfect, absolutely perfect. But even though that's the case, we don't benefit from that perfection. You would be so glowing if you did. You wouldn't be in one of Ken's talks. I don't know what you'd be doing, but you wouldn't need to come and listen to this stuff. So we don't benefit. It's wonderful. We don't benefit. So we must work. Now, to come away from this text and to go back to Akon Rinpoche, sometimes people would ask him, especially in the early years when we were starting to do Chinrezig prayers and Guru Rinpoche prayers and so on. People would say, why do we have to do all these prayers? And he would say, as long as your mind's talking, you need to do prayers. When your mind stops talking, then you can stop the prayers, no problem. So the idea is something remedial. So this is what this verse is talking about. An improper mode of mental activity and a proper mode of mental activity. The improper mode is what keeps us in the cycle of rebirth. It's like me now with my heart experiences this last week or two, but anyway, the fact that I'm old. The next life is very close for me. I'm very, very, very aware of it. And there'll probably be not much choice. I'm going to get born again. Be a baby again, have new parents, grow up again, go back to school again, get the hormones again, go through the whole blooming story. Again, with a bit of luck somewhere in there, the few light bulbs will come on and I'll climb my way back. And it will take me a long time to get back to where I am now, right? Before I can even go further. That's the reality of it. So we do want to get out. So what keeps us in the cycle of birth and makes us hurt our own minds, hurt our own hearts, hurt each other's minds, make more karma, get into all of the complexity of all of it, life. That produces suffering. So it's called the improper mode of mental activity. We are not using our minds efficiently. And we allow in our minds poisons, things that hurt other people, hurt us, confuse us, make our mind, which is huge potential, limited. Okay, let's have a bit of light entertainment. I mustn't be too serious today. Now, this is probably politically incorrect, right? So forgive me if you are a politically correct person. It's one of those nationalist jokes, but it could be any two countries, right? It could be France and Belgium. It could be England and Ireland. In this particular case, it was Norway and Sweden. And somewhere on the border between the two, deep in the forests, we're in the big vast spaces, not much people at all. There's a store where they sell stores for woodcutters. And once a year, there are two people who meet up there. They become friends over the years. They both of them cut trees for a living. And then one year they meet up. Yeah, coming out the store, they meet up. And one says to the other, because they've been using the traditional saws that you push backwards and forwards with your hands, and axes. One of them, he says, I bought a chainsaw. And the guy said, oh, one of those modern things. Yeah. He said, oh, well, good luck. So they go off. And they meet up the next year. And said, how did you get on with your chainsaw? And he said, oh, it's incredible. I've got 5 to 10 times the amount of timber I did last year. It's amazing. I mean, it's just so, you should get one. So it costs a lot of money, but you should get one. You'll get the money back. So the guy buys a chainsaw, they go off, they say, see you next year. They come back next year. And the second person who bought the chainsaw said, "Phew, load of rubbish, your chainsaw, isn't it?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, 5 to 10 times more. Yeah, sure. He said, "I couldn't even do as much as I used to do in my own saw." I said, "That can't be. It's impossible. There must be something wrong with it." I said, "Here, give it to me. Let me have a look." So he puts it on the ground, puts his foot in it to hold it in place, and he pulls the string, and the other guy says, "What's that noise?" So he's been using a chainsaw without ever starting the motor. Okay, it's a joke. No, it's a joke. And I didn't say which one was Norwegian and which one was Swedish, so there's no prejudice involved. But anyway, you've got this thing called a mind, right? You've got this thing called feelings, emotions. You've got this body, which has got chakras and all sorts of heart energy, sacral energy, crown chakra energy. We've got an amazing piece of equipment we call a precious human birth. How you use this heart of yours, how you use the creative sacral power of your chakras, and so on, how you use your speech can be damaging or it can be helpful. And then it can be especially helpful if we use all of those in the practice of Dharma. Our body-mind unit becomes something that can function well. So now, having said that, if we go back on the same page, there are 2 lines in there which, from the point of view of Vajrayana, are extraordinarily important. It said, "Therefore, the subtle channels, vital winds, and life drops, when pure, are the form kaya, and when unpurified, the impure form kaya." So there is making a point about purity. But the point is showing us the internalized view. Often you hear, in Dharma, rather than try and change the world, change yourself. But the amazing thing that happens is when you really change yourself, the whole world changes. Because what it's talking about there, these energy channels and the various energies, winds that blow through them, and all the various life drops, the hormones and other things that our body conveys and circulates, and all these things they talk about these days, dopamine and all the rest of them in the brain, all of that. If we can not let it lose its center, so it's manifesting all the time as self, others, duality, interaction, love, hate, greed, whatever. If we can draw all of those energies back into the center so they're not projecting, then our whole vision of reality changes. Reality itself will change for us, and we find ourselves in paradise here on earth. Our eyes see differently, our ears hear differently, we feel each other differently. Nothing but overwhelming kindness for everyone we meet. One Lama, he says, it's like falling in love with everyone you meet all through the day. Not falling in love romantically, but your heart is moved by everyone. If we change the central core of what we are, the whole way life manifests to us will change. So in order to do that, we have the various levels of Dharma teachings, the basic morality, meditation practices, and then bodhicitta, all the bodhisattvas, counsel, advice, path. And so we can follow And then we have Vajrayana, of course, which is very powerful, but also quite dangerous. It's not without risk. We lose people. So we have all of those. They are called the proper mode of mental activity. So that's what we can do every day. We practice, we apply the teachings in daily life as we go about our work and business. And we can change. So we come with the baggage of our old habits, which is like one stick. And then our new Dharma practice is like another stick. Sticks, they're solid things. But the thing with sticks is you can rub two sticks together. And if you rub hard enough, then they catch fire. And you go, which will be all the ways that we accelerate our practice with good advice from our teachers. And the two sticks which were solid catch fire and both disappear. By itself, one stick, you could look at it for ages, it won't disappear. And the other stick, you need the interaction and the friction. That's interesting times. It's when Dharma challenges our old habits and we find our way forward. So that verse is so relevant. That's why we do prayers. That's why, rather than our mind just talking rubbish all day long, as Akon Rinpoche used to say, talking rubbish is, your mind talking rubbish is all day long. And when we watch it in meditation, it's just crazy about this and that. There's a term in Tibetan called miziguzi. Miziguzi or miche guche means the mind does 9 times what it didn't even need to do once. So if you're thinking about what somebody said, you just think about it once and then it's gone. You go back, you think about it again. You think about it again a different way. And then at night you can't sleep in bed. And so there you think about it about 50 different times in 50 different ways. Our mind is inefficient, unpredictable, can cause a lot of damage. So we want to make that into a good mind, one that we can trust, one we can use to help others, one which becomes ahimsa, never causing harm to anybody. That's our aspiration. So the proper mode of mental work, mental activity, needs to rub against the traditional habits. And that's the way all of it disappears. Duality will disappear, and then there will only be Buddha nature left. That's the amazing thing. So we start off, the rubbing's quite intense, but as we get along into Mahamudra, then we just learn how to let things dissolve more readily. And then the next verse says, the flower of the marks of perfection will blossom. It's a flower blossoming, which means that already there's something there to blossom. There's the seed is there, and the seed has been growing. But when will you actually get the flower? We've got a lot of flowers here at the moment after the winter. They're so beautiful. When that tight bud suddenly opens up and you've got the color and the perfume and the exquisite shapes. And each flower is a miniature paradise. So all of that was there in the seed, but this is the sort of wow moment. So the flower of the marks of perfection, that means the fullness of Buddhahood, so helpful for everyone, will blossom in the one who has the space kaya. So we've heard about Dhammakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nimanakaya, and sometimes we hear about Svabhavika Kaya, the very essence of all those three very famous Kayas. But now the third Karmapa is bringing in a term which is space Kaya. So Kaya means one way that the Buddha is. It means the body or the embodiment of Buddha. Dhammakaya, Buddha as only Buddhas will ever know. Sambhogakaya, Buddhas as they manifest to wonderful bodhisattvas. Nimanakaya, Buddhas as they can manifest here to us on earth. But space Kaya is a timeless, changeless space of Buddha nature. Now, why? Why do we have this analogy of space just now? If we go back to Maitreya's original Buddha nature teachings, which I'm indicating because they're in there somewhere down there, then we get quite a very interesting section of analogies of the elements. Earth, water, fire, and wind. Earth, water, fire, and wind are dynamic elements. They're present all the time, but they change. Sometimes there's a lot of fire element, sometimes a lot of earth element or water element. They're interacting with each other, interdependent, and changing all the time. The space element never changes. So within space, if we take on a very gross level, actual real fire, fires come, fires go. It says little fires come, little fires go. Bigger fires like volcanoes, they come for a few thousand, a few million years and go. And then whole universes, it says, go up in smoke at the end. Whatever, the fires come and go. Water comes and goes. If we look now, they're trying to find out where the water came from on this planet. And it's really quite interesting in so many planets without water. Water comes, water goes. Sometimes in deserts, water comes for a couple of days and goes to next year. So all sorts of water comes and goes, great rivers, oceans. Within space, the space doesn't change because it isn't anything. That's why it's space. If it was something, it wouldn't be space. We use the word space when there's nothing. Otherwise it's something. And the same with Earth. And then everything that those elements really mean, in sort of physics terms. Earth is matter, water element is bonding, fire element is the energy that's within the bonded matter, and then wind element is kinesis, it's movement. There, when we go down to an atomic level, subatomic level, they're happening all the time. Whiz, bang, join up, link. It's mad down there, Brownian motion and all of that. If we could zoom down to the atomic level, there's this mad, crazy, moving world of the four elements. But space is static. So in Maitreya's teachings, he talks about this. And so he says, then within that, and then we get an analogy for the elements. These ones are like the ignorance that's driving it all. Then this is like our emotions, our feelings, our reactivity. And this is about our thoughts. And then through them, we get karma. The solid product is karma. We get dynamically involved with something, we end up creating karma, and then we get the results of happiness and suffering. All of that we're doing all day long throughout our life is the busyness of our samsaric mind. And yet all of that takes place inside space. Space never changes. So within the space of pure Buddha mind that always was, our consciousness is making our story. So it says, the Buddha mind, with all of its beauty like a flower, all the beautiful radiance of perfection of an enlightened mind, will happen in those who have the space kaya. And this is key to the previous course we had about Mahamudra. We are learning to find this space, which is here every moment, the space in which a thought happens, the space in which a feeling happens, the space in which experience happens, and somebody is looking at you, talking to you, and you're eating your food. Every moment, this sacred, changeless space is here. So when one acquires and one learns through the friction of the improper and proper modes of mental activity to get to a place through the 5 stages of the path where we're in the space kaya, as he calls it, then all of the wonder of Buddha mind will manifest. And he mentions here 4 things. Now, 4 things to tuck in the brim of your hat, because they're for later. They're not quite for now. There's no harm knowing them now, but we can't really apply them now. So, freedom from 4 things. The first one is ideas concerning something to be given up. Now, at our stage, there are a lot of things to be given up. And just by knowing that in the end they're not to be given up is not helpful. And there's a lot of stuff now on internet, on all sorts of teachings and Dzogchen sites that echo this kind of idea. There's nothing to give up. Oh, that's nice. God, I was just about to embark on 12 years of intense Buddhist practice, but there's nothing to give up. Oh, well, I'll go and have a cup of coffee. And that's it. I mean, it must be enlightened then. And that won't work. It won't work. Again and again, our wonderful teacher, Taisituba, who's teaching this afternoon about Heart of Vajrayana, he tells us, of course, we're all Buddha inside, ultimately, but relatively, we all need to work. And when he talks about himself very humbly, he says, of course, ultimately I'm Buddha, but I've got a long way to go yet before I manifest as Buddha. So, but in the end, it's not as though there's something real to be given up. I can't explain this. Nobody can explain this. Because words cannot describe it. But when we get closer, not to the very end, but when we get a long way down the path, this just becomes clearer and clearer. It's not as though there's something solid that needs to go. What needs to go is, well, let's take an example. It's not perfect, but a dream. Okay, imagine you dream you're stuck in a gigantic car park, concrete car park. Okay, you go upstairs, you go downstairs, you go wandering for hundreds of meters this way, that way, nothing but cars, more decks, more corridors, staircases, and one of those sort of dreams. Right? Maybe in your dream you got access to resources. They call it a pneumatic drill, dynamite, so that you can start to blow up, or you can start taking apart or digging through a hole. What you need to do is not blow up the car park, but wake up, because it's a dream. When you wake up, where did all that car park go? It's like it's all gone. It's all gone. This is just an example. It doesn't describe it. Nothing can describe it till you get the meditation experience. Then it makes absolute sense. You won't be able to describe it to anybody else. That's how it works. But in the end, it's not as though this is a technical job. You know, you've got a piece of land, it's got rocks and other things, you want to make it into a garden, you have to take the rocks away. It's not work on the same level. We don't have to take away 1,000 lifetimes of past, take them away with machines, take them away. We have to wake up. And when we wake up, it's all over. So there isn't something to be relinquished. Well, there is, while we're on the path, in the 5 stages of the path, there is something to relinquish, and we relinquish it with remedies. Once we wake up, we won't need remedies. Remedies for what? There's nothing there to remedy. And then thatness, suchness, Buddha mind, which we talk about here as though it's something elsewhere, something other, something wonderful. There won't be a thatness to think about, talk about, know about. It will just be. Not even a question of, oh, this is that. It just is. And then all the characteristics of the outcome, the Buddha qualities and so on. These 4 ideas are very important for us. They're keynotes for the path that we're on. So there is something to be given up while we're still locked in consciousness. There are remedies for doing that. The reason we're doing it is to reach what we call thatness, suchness, the Buddha mind, which has so many qualities, characteristics of the outcome. For us, while we're locked in consciousness, these are vital. They keep us moral, they keep us diligent, and give us all the qualities. So how do we work through those? The next point is a big one. It's a kind of need to know from Buddha nature teachings point, very, very important. It's the 3 phases of the path. Impure, pure and impure, and perfectly pure. They are the 3 phases of sentient beings, of bodhisattvas, and Buddhas, Tathagatas. So 3 phases. Sentient beings are reborn. They're reborn in various sorts of bodies, depending, they're humans, animals, devas, and so on. But they're reborn in a body. And once you're in a body like this human body, then you are totally dependent on these eyes to see. You can only see what these eyes of yours see. I was in the hospital the other day. I had to undress and put on what you put on to go in the theatre. And so they give you a locker and you put your clothes in there and your stuff. And then there's a code on the door. They say, put your date of birth, so you'll be sure to remember it. Not your date, the year of your birth. But you have to put your glasses in there as well. So when I came back to the locker, nowadays my sight's such that I couldn't see. And so in trying to do it, I messed up the lock. And then in the end, the nurse had to go and get a key, master key for all of them. So anyway, so we depend on these eyes. We've only ever seen what these eyes have seen. We can't see through walls. We can't see other Devas see differently than us. We only hear what these ears hear. Our whole life experience has come in through these sense doors of our body, 5 sense doorways. And then ideas came in that we process with this brain from other people. So 6 doorways, 5 senses, and the mind doorway. So that's what rebirth, that's what samsara means. You are reborn into a body. That's your kit for life. And then what comes and goes is the rest of your karma, your parents, your siblings. You grow up, life happens, people come to you, wealth, poverty, all those things we look at in the beginning prayer. So that phase is called impure, because there are always, once you've got a body, bodies want. They get hungry, they want food, they want sex, they want lots of things. Once you've got a body, it's natural to want and to dislike, and so on and so on. And then we're fed ideas. So that's called impure, because there's always impurity. One of the big teachings of the Buddha. Once you're embodied, impurities come along with it. We need to manage them as best we can. Nevertheless, in one of these lives, like we have now in a human body, we can still practice a lot of Dharma to get out of rebirth type life. So then if we practice enough, and we go through the first 2 of the 5 stages of the path, stage of accumulation, stage of integration, then eventually we can stop the cycle of obligatory reincarnation. Then we become bodhisattva, become a pure mind, relatively pure mind. It's called pure and impure here because when we become a bodhisattva, Buddha nature never leaves us. It's always there. It's our default mind state. But on the surface, we still have the baggage of past lives that we work through the 10 bodhisattva levels. But in those levels, because we have the baggage, that's impure, but it's very mild impure, but it's there. And it gets less and less. But also it's pure because we have Buddha nature all the time, and its brightness and its extent, its vastness grow and grow and grow through the bodhisattva levels. So that's called the pure and impure phase of bodhisattvas. So we're not talking about people in the world here. They say, oh yeah, Ken is a real bodhisattva, meaning he's a nice guy, kind guy. We're not talking about that. We are talking about minds where the mind stream has been freed once and for all from the power of rebirth. Because the power of ignorance, power of desire, power of anger and all of those is no longer potent, neutralized. We've used our mind intelligently, wisely, kindly to get rid of those things. So that's the pure and impure phase of bodhisattvas. And then we can work up to 10th level, and the top of the 10th level bodhisattva, Maitreya, and then at the end we become Buddha. So that point about the 3 phases of beings, very famous, we do need to know it. So it says, even though it's taught like that, coming on to the next lines now, even though it's taught like that, 3 phases, impure. Pure, but still a bit impure. Totally pure. Even though it's taught like that, the Buddha state does not arise anew. In our own relative story, of course it does. We're not Buddha, we're not actually manifest Buddha until we get to the end of the bodhisattva path. But then what has happened is that what is now seemingly new, has always been. And so it's like waking up from a dream. If some people wake up very quickly, some people are slow wakers. And there's, I remember one cook, I had to get out of bed in Samueling every morning to go to the kitchen. And anyway, so you're sort of in the sleep and sort of out, and not out, and out. When you're awake, and you're in the world that always was. So it says Buddha does not arise anew. That's what it says here. But the main point is, you don't make it. You don't build up points and qualities. You don't become more and more generous and more moral, more and more forbearing, until in the end, you've built up an amazing story, like you build up a house or a garden. Our Dharma journey is not one of accumulating till in the end it works. It's like if you build a car, you need to get wheels, you need to get the engine, you need to get all the bits, and it's only when all the bits are together that you can turn the key in the ignition and vroom, drive away. No wheels, no motor, you need the whole kit. So relatively, we need all 6 parameters perfectly. But in truth, all 6 parameters are not constructive, they are destructive. We are taking away, it's like that piece of gemstone I showed before here. Taking away so that the jewel is all that's left. We're not becoming more generous, we're becoming less mean. We're not becoming more and more moral, we're losing our corruption. We're not becoming more and more forbearing, impatience and anger and blame and all those things are being taken away. We are not building up a meditation state, we're getting rid of distractions and obstacles. It's a destructive path. It's waking up. So it says, it is the same after as it was before. Very, very famous quote from Maitreya. It's the same after all of your hundreds of lifetimes have passed. It's the same after as it was before you even started. Nothing changed there. Nothing changed. And I made a song with Katie 2 years ago, I think it was. And she added a line to it, which was brilliant. And it was, but I've always known this, which is what people sometimes say when they get the first awakening to Buddha mind. I've always known this. And in fact, all their life they haven't. It's really the first time. But that feeling, because it's natural, it's what always was. Same after as it was before. This changeless is the Buddha essence. The change, and it means the change that happens as we're on the path, is the relinquishing of stains, is the destructive part. So then it carries on to some who have adopted a negative view hold the idea that the Buddha qualities have no condition, or else that they are not within oneself, but created by external causes and conditions. What is the difference between such a view and the non-Buddhist outsider's belief in permanence or nihilism? So now we come to a bit of the text which, today I've said this is really important. This is a famous saying, you need to know this, 3 phases of the path, and same after as it was before. I can't say that what comes next is not important. It's the third Karmapa's wonderful speech. And it is important, but maybe not so important for you and me. Now, why? we need to go back, I think, here into history. So the third Karmapa's time was after the second Karmapa's time. The second Karmapa, Karmapakshi, was an incredibly important figure in Asian history for the Khan family, the Mongol emperors, Kublai Khan, Monga Khan, the Khan family. At that time, Mongolia was stronger than China, or as the history went by, as strong as China. And until the time of the second Karmapa, Karmapakshi, then the Chinese emperors had, as their Buddhist court gurus, the Sakyapa clan in Tibet. The Sakyapa lineage is a family lineage, so that the head of the Sakyapa was handed down to a nephew because they were celibate, so they didn't have sons as heirs, but they usually had brothers and sisters with sons. And so the Sakya line was a family dynasty that had been for a while the gurus of the Emperor of China. So they go to China, they give empowerments, they give teachings. The emperor was all powerful, almost, but he did have a court of ministers and the ones who raised the taxes and spent the money. And so to cut a long story short, when Karmapakshi, second Karmapa, came along, and through the power of karma and destiny, he became, after a very, very troubled story, the guru for the Chinese or Mongolian emperor. The ministers said, hey, this is wonderful. This is second Karmapa. He was chosen by a letter written by the first Karmapa. It's not the same family. Do you realize every year we're obliged to send more and more offerings to the Sakya family? Last year it was so many yak loads of silk, brocades, carpet, gold, all of this, because that's what emperors did to their gurus, made offerings. And they said, it's getting more and more. Here we've not got a whole family to look after. We've got one celibate monk without a family dynasty. And also, just look, and when Karmapakshi was in the imperial capital, there were 14 days, I think it was him, miracles that the whole population saw. Well, they said, this is the real deal, and financially very interesting. So the emperors switched from the Karmapa tradition, which was quite new. Dusum Chempa, the first Karmapa, had a lot of activity, but it was new activity, a new school emerging in Tibet. The Sakyapa was already there. Gelugpa doesn't exist yet. That took another few generations to come into being. And the Nimapa from the 8th century was there, but it wasn't all the new stuff that came from the Indian revitalization. Our Kaju tradition had been very small at first, Mapa, Milarepa. Gampopa made it bigger, then Karmapa. So this, what was called the second wave, or the new wave of Buddhism in Tibet, was quite new. And there was a need for the Karmapa, the third Karmapa, to show his position, his philosophical position in the scheme of things, if that makes some sense. So the next verse is, it's not a thorough thing, but he's kind of positioning himself with respect to non-Buddhist schools and others. So if you know philosophy and you've studied a lot, then it's quite interesting. It's the usual, you say, cursus that we go through when we study our Kagyu philosophy, first we see how it's different from non-Buddhist schools, and then within Buddhism, how it's different from the Shravaka Theravada school, how it's Mahayana, but within the Mahayana, it's this particular Madhyamaka middle way, and so on and so on. If you've not studied that, then the next bit's not, it's, I would need weeks or months to explain it, quite honestly. So we'll go through it quickly. So he's saying that these Buddha qualities, he says, some people think they don't have any condition. They're not made by causes and conditions, which is true in a way. We've just seen, because we've just come on from, this always was. This always was. But he says, some hold that they are no condition, that they just happen. He said, this can't be. So, how to explain this quickly? Okay, let's localize it. Let's say you, okay? One day, and I hope it's soon, you're going to become a Buddha. And I hope you get there before I do. And please remember me when you do. But what will happen when you become a Buddha? And when you manifest, or when you have the three kayas? They're not all the same. When any of us here becomes Buddha, we all become Dharmakaya. That's the isness that always was, never changes. That's what becoming Buddha means. But then, so that's totally private, intimate. Nobody else knows that. That's you. Your mind will become that timeless peace and perfection. What you share with others is through your manifestation. Now that happens through causes and conditions. Because like just now, let me pick somebody. I hope you don't mind. Who can I pick? Tim. Okay, Tim, I'm going to pick you. Okay. Like when you become Buddha, right? We've got a connection. You'll have been praying for me all through your worldly incarnations as a developing Buddhist, through all the 10 bodhisattva levels. They have this connection which gets better and better. Through the power of all those prayers and the fact that we are connected. When you become Buddha Tim, then your radiance and manifestation of Pure Lands with the qualities is what we're talking about here, to me, will happen entirely through the momentum of all that you've done on the path in relation to me and everyone you've known. So when we look at the different 1,000 Buddhas of this age, they all have different length of time of Buddha activity, different numbers. Some have huge numbers, some less numbers. It's all to do with the momentum of the power gathered on the bodhisattva path, life after life after life, through connections, good deeds, helping, and so on. So the way that happens is just magical, because when at the end you become Buddha Tim, you won't have to sit there thinking, I've got to look after Ken now, and I do this, or I'm going to manifest him at Chinrezik's Pure Land next, and then, there's that guy over there too, I'll do this. It's nothing at all. It's totally spontaneous, automatic result of all of the causes on the path. And we didn't look at them here in class, but I sent you a backup leaflet about the 32 marks of a Buddha. When people see them, so when I see Buddha Tim, and I see the mound on Buddha Tim's head, then I'm going to feel all of the devotion you had to your gurus over the lifetimes and lifetimes, to your teachers and to the Dhamma and so on. So that whole manifestation of your Buddha fields and Buddha activity to help me will happen spontaneously. So Karmapa says, it's not without condition. but it is not a conditioned existence, so we can't go any deeper than that. He says, some people say that the Buddha qualities are not within oneself. They are. But they are created by external conditions, as though they could be given by an external force, an external being, an external mind. He says that's those views, they're like non-Buddhist views. They believe there's a God who can do these things, or that there's no causes, just stuff happens. If you have a lovely experience, just luck, just chemistry, brain chemistry. It says the active force manifests in instant. Active means creative, makes karma. Manifests in instants. It appears, it disappears. It appears, disappears. Both of them, whether it's an impure karma creating force or whether it's a dharma, pure karma creating force, the way it happens is just in split seconds. Gone, and then a new one, and another one, but they sequence to make our reality. It says, now, one way we can see this is like a constant interaction with the form kaya of the Buddhas. So if it were not like this, the activity of the form kaya would be interrupted. Therefore, don't so much talk about active force, karma, creative power of mind, but rather jhana, which understands diversity. Here we've got a reference to what's called the discerning wisdom. So we've got 5 Buddha wisdoms, 5 enlightened wisdoms. What he's saying there is a pure way of starting to look at things is Buddha's wisdom's here all the time. Our own struggle with our mind and with our creations, what we do with our thoughts and feelings and body, speech and mind, moment after moment. Let's see it as our dance with discerning wisdom. Discerning wisdom means it knows everything for what it is, every person for what they are. As we saw in the 10 powers of wisdom, every stream of consciousness, every path of karma. See it, it's like you are known all the time. Buddha mind knows you all the time. So I think we'll stop there for today. I think that's, we've had a good session. I did want to share with you, it's actually from a Zen master. It's a very, very nice little bit of verse. You come into this world empty-handed, and you'll leave it empty-handed. That's human. When you are born, where do you come from? When you die, where do you go? This life, is like a floating cloud which appears, and death is like a floating cloud which disappears. The floating cloud itself does not originally exist. Life and death, coming and going, are also like that. But there's one thing which always remains clear. It is pure. It is clear, not depending on life or death. Then, what is the one pure and clear thing? Question mark. So I really like that. It's nice. So now anything that was good and useful, I sent out the dedication prayers in English now, so let's do them together in English. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained. Through the main enemy, mind defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every being become freed from the ocean of existence, troubled by the waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it has not arisen. May its development know no setbacks, and may it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may I quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Thank you. So, over to you. Anything you like to say?
Okay.
Hi. Focus. Hi there.
It's really good to see you looking better this week. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks so much for the great teachings. I wondered, is it okay to ask you something about just the difficulty I'm having at the moment with my cat and a flea problem? Is it okay to ask about that now?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I give you a good answer, but yeah.
It's just really about what to do. I just realised yesterday that the cat has fleas, so I'm just wondering, because obviously I took the body exact vow, and yeah, that's quite difficult. I always find these situations go.
Yeah, they are. I mean,
you don't have to answer if it's, I know it's a difficult.
There is. I mean, there's no way I can answer. There's no way I can say, yeah, kill the fleas, because killing lots and lots of sentient beings for one cat, which are themselves killers of other beings, is weird. Animals are complicated. There's no way I can say to do that. But then I know that once people live with animals, then it's what they do. You buy a collar or you take them to the vets or whatever. If you're going to do it with prayers. But ideally, you don't. I don't know if any of you read the book 12 Years in a Cave. It's the story of Tenzin Palmo, 12-year retreat in a cave. It's not written by her. It's written by a ghostwriter called Mackenzie. But anyway, she's in a cave at one point, and it's a year where there are lots and lots and lots and lots more fleas. So she just learns to live with the fleas, basically.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's very hard. And then it's not. Sorry?
Sorry. In a way, I'd love to be able to do that in a way, but then I guess it's knowing that the cat's health actually isn't great. I think it's not too bad, but that can affect his health more, and also that living with my son and his girlfriend, and they have a really strong aversion to any little insects.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, this is what happens once you've got stuff or animals. I mean, it's terrible. Like at Samiling, right? It's like a hotel. It's like a restaurant. So it has to comply with the health and safety regulations. And then being Samiling out in the country, it's got rats and mice, and so in the end, it was either a question of closing down Samueling as a public establishment or doing something about. So then, by that, first it was rats and mice, but then afterwards it's insects in the kitchen. So then people come to Samueling. I remember the first time they hired Rent-A-Kill, this company, and they see the Rent-A-Kill van in the Buddhist center, and it's like, what? And what can you do? And then they go in the kitchen and they see one of these insectocutors over, it's either that or closed down. And so there's no answer. And then I had another friend, a good friend, I knew her mum, who was a vet, and so the daughter trained to be a vet. And then she became Buddhist in the 1970s. And then she realized that, but look, people are going to be coming to me to put animals down, to euthanize them. And so she was in a quandary. And she went to talk with Kala Rinpoche. And he says, what happens if you don't put the animal down when people ask you? She said, well, they just take it to the next vet and they give them. So he said, in that case, it's better I teach you how to pray for dying animals and that you give them the injection, because they're going to die anyway. I mean, they're going to be jagged, whether it's today or tomorrow. And so there's not a satisfactory answer. Once you've got premises, once you've got animals, it's life. It's like us. We can't live without eating. And once you eat, what you eat, it nearly always involves suffering somewhere or somewhere. Just have to do our best.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your time.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, I had a question about wish-fulfilling gems.
Oh, yes.
Because of how you started. It's always made me wonder about wish-fulfilling gems and their cultural context.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know I've heard other teachers say that they were joking, but they were saying in the West, a wish-fulfilling gem might be your iPad or your iPhone. Like there's something very, very precious to you. But I just wonder whether you could just talk about the cultural context of this.
Yeah, it comes from Indian mythology, where they were supposed to exist on Earth, or mainly in the Naga realms or the Deva realms. So there are stories of people who go to get them from the Naga realms or the Deva realms. And it is what it said. It says it's a jewel. In the past, they didn't seem to cut jewels with facets. They were more cabochon, smooth jewels. And they were endowed with power so that when you got close to them and made a wish, then it would help the wish come true. That's the mythology. It's not Buddhist, it's just Indian mythology. The real wish-fulfilling gem, that works, something that when you get close to it, actually makes your wishes come true, is the Bodhisattva mind. And this is why Tibetans are so keen on a contact with their great lamas. So assuming the lama is a great lama, not just got the name great lama, or not somebody's nephew, but really and truly a spiritual being, a holy being.
Mm-hmm.
When you get close to them in your life, it changes your karma around. It brings blessings. And with time, then your wishes come true. Now, of course, our wishes at that point are Dharma wishes, but it changes from nice ideas to that you actually do get some strength. You can help other people. You are lightening your own mind. So I think in reality, because a gem is something very precious. And it's a question of getting close to something that's very precious. So to my mind, like so many myths, deep inside us we know what's going on. So outside we project that into gods and heavens and all sorts of things. So deep inside humanity, they know there is something very precious, and as we draw close to it, it can change everything. It's magic. And then so this comes through as the ideas of sacred beings, divine beings who have these very special jewels.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So as I understand it, it's about knowing that there is something very, very precious inside of us as laid out in the Buddha nature text, actually,
Exactly.
with all its descriptions. And that when we meet a presence of that in the relative world, it can bring us much closer to that understanding.
Yes, that's it.
Thank you, Ken.
And it magnetizes our own, what's already there in an outer bodhisattva, or sometimes in sacred places. I must admit, not so much from theory, but in 1977, 78, I spent the winter, 2 months, next to the Bodhnath Stupa. I was interpreting for Trungpa Rinpoche at the time. And I found the presence of that stupa
Okay.
incredible. I really felt this.
Yeah.
This is a wish fulfilling gem. If I make prayers here, they're going to come true. And it had a lot of oomph.
Yeah, I had that experience too, someplace. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really. Yeah, in front of a Buddhist statue in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah, very powerful. Yeah, thank you. And just a side note about dust, about fleas and things like that. I think some of our answers can be found in the vegan community. So if people get stuck, they might want to have a Google of what people do in the vegan community, because they're always looking after. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Vicky.
Can I have a question?
Yes, hello, Maurice.
So, living in Japan, Buddhism came with Kukai. He brought it from China in about 7th century. And that was a Mikyo, we call it, the Vajrayana. And I think with a lot of elaboration, and they had the Vajra and the bell and quite elaborate tankas and whole practice. And he was one of these people who were quite miraculous, and also he was an engineer, and there's a lot of, it's just like an infinite actually amount of work on him, on Kukai and Kobodaishi. And then after that, it became more like the Zen tradition, which is sort of throughout the Chan Buddhism, and were very simple. Everything was just, when you think of a Zen garden, it's very, very simple. The way of meditating is much more simplified, with less rituals and with interesting koans like the one that you read at the end of the session there. And I don't know if they, in historical perspective, have a connection with, like, with the later teachers that evolved in Tibet and then across, because if you think of the 7th century and then a 12th century, or like it's coming back and forth. I don't know. Do you know any references or texts that talk about that? For
that particular tradition, no, I don't. I've never really looked into it or researched it. But nearly all of the Buddhist traditions, they start from India. And what happens is they were carried to other countries by relatively very few people. So what the countries like China got, for instance, are what a handful of pilgrims who traveled around India picked up and brought back home. And then not everything they brought back home was people's cup of tea. So some things went well and other things didn't last. They didn't last so long. But the origins are in India. And then what was happening in India, and I think this is why the Karmapa got not stuck, but slowed down in his historical researches, because he realized what a complex picture of spirituality there was in India. in the first 1,000 years of Buddhism, and how there's so much cross-fertilization. So we do find elements of what we see in Tibetan Tantric Buddhism. We do find those in Japan, we find them in Burma, and I'm sure in some other places. And
the one thing to interrupt you, the one thing that strikes me though is a lot of, even in Japan, this kind of mountain pilgrim is a really strong, and this being a yogi in the mountain, you know, whether it's in the Himalayas or the mountains, of meditation, of taking a retreat, that seems to be a common thread, which is interesting. Yeah, anyway, it's like you said, the first 1,000 years are just so, you know, such a vast expansion in also Thailand and down to Sri Lanka, the Theravada and Mahayana. But
yes. It's very complicated, and then, but it's very informative, because then you can see, that's why they do what they do these days. That's why that's there, and so different in another Buddhist country.
Well, I think the morality, like in Japan, you never have to lock your door. You can, I mean, pretty well, you know, and maybe not so much in Tokyo, but there's a lot of trust and not to this idea of karma being very important, a strong, you know, tradition that seems to help together for some reason. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Maurice. Thank you. Is that us finished for today? Good. Okay, well, we did our dedication, so I wish you all very, very, very well. And so next week is our final one. We've got some verses to finish, but we've done most of the essential of this text, and it went very well, I think. Okay, see you all.
Thank you, Ken, so much.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Take care, Yusa.